Thank you for the invitation to speak, have a keynote at this Congress. And I'm happy to be able to share with you some of my research over the years. So the title of my presentation is I Had to Dare to Go Beyond My Comfort Zone. Ways to Promote Lifelong Learning of Spiritual Care. The title comes from a reflective note from a student, from a mandatory assignment all first-year students with us have to do. It's in the first semester, and we send them out to find a person that they can ask a few questions related to spirituality. So we're using the one question from Stoll's assessment guide of spiritual care. So they are asked to talk about sources of hope and strength. So I had to dare to go beyond my comfort zone was what many of the students reported in their written assignment afterwards. So this also brings me back to an interview I had with a patient some time ago. And she talked about, from a patient's perspective, that she realized that not everybody is willing to go beyond their comfort zone. So from a patient perspective, healthcare staff can be like this gigantic traffic light. Some red, some yellow, and a few greens, where the greens means I'm ready to listen to you. So I'd like to read from this patient narrative to you. And she says, I have been admitted many times, both in intensive care units and here at the medical unit. They don't ask about how I am or what is important for me. It seems like they are afraid of that. If they see that I'm crying, they become afraid. I have trained the whole life to seem happy, so I can that. But sometimes I get overwhelmed. But because I see they get stressed by it, I try not to show them. So then I ask her, how do you see what a nurse can tolerate? Well, I see that they are uncomfortable, nervous and such, fluttering the eyelids and uneasy in their body. Some get very quiet. They don't know what to say. I see that they are uncertain. Others say, I have to go and do other things. But some are not afraid, and they come to me. I can see it in their eyes. They are not afraid. I feel safe when they are there. Some people touch me gently on my shoulder, because it's good to feel that they are close and have time when we shall talk about the existential. That they are not 15 feet a yard away from my bed. Then I feel that we are not connected. I feel that many of the staff are uncomfortable. Not that they do not want to help me, but they have no education so that they can be able to talk with people about their deep feelings. They lack experience and they feel helpless. They need education so they can prepare and can understand how they should respond when patients tell their stories. They should try to find something nice to say, because it's okay to feel that what you feel when you are a patient. Accept it. Don't worry if a patient is sad, because if you worry, the patient will try to hide it away from you. So my background is in nursing and in education and research. So I will speak to you from that background. So when I mention nursing, you might come from another profession. So please try to name your own profession when I'm talking about nursing. And also when I use patients, if you call your users or those you serve other names, please kind of change that in your own mind when I'm talking. So in other words, try to apply in your context what I want to share with you. So if we look at the professional responsibility we have, I can say that nurses have the clear statement of all health professions that spirituality and spiritual care is part of our responsibility. So if we look at the International Council of Nursing, the Code of Ethics for Nurses, it says that in providing care, the nurse promotes an environment in which the human rights, values, customs, and spiritual beliefs of the individual, family, and community are respected. So in other words, my responsibility goes beyond my personal interest. It is my professional responsibility to create an environment where the patient feel that their values, customs, and spiritual beliefs are respected. So that is important to bear in mind. So if we go to research, there are some disturbing findings. Nurses keep reporting that they feel ill-prepared, not well enough prepared through their education. And they are unsure what spirituality and spiritual care means. And students keep reporting that they see very few role models when they are in clinical practice. And they also lack a professional language to talk about spirituality and to document spiritual issues and spiritual care. So in my view, it's possible for us to lay a good foundation for spiritual care in education. But our students will never feel really well prepared through their 3 or 4 years of undergraduate education. So if we can lay that foundation, that's what should be expected from the education part of side. So then the continued learning in clinical practice becomes very important. So leaders in healthcare, they should take on the responsibility for continued education, continued reflection, continued learning. So there is this mixture of leadership responsibility and personal responsibility for a continued learning and development in this area, as in all other aspects of healthcare. So what is spirituality and spiritual care? This is an important question. And I think how you answer this impact how your practice is and how your understanding of professional responsibilities. But before I answer this, I want to take you on a little detour because that has been important for me and for my understanding of spirituality and spiritual care. Because there are different understandings of which concept is the highest level. Is it spirituality? Is it religion? Is it existential? Is it meaning? And I've experienced that in different disciplines and in different parts of the world, different concepts communicate to the people. So even though we have a definition, we should be aware of how our words are communicating. So over the last 20 years, I have been very fortunate and have journeyed together with other great researchers in nursing and midwifery. So Professor Pamela Cohn from Azusa Pacific University in California, I met her in 2021, and we have completed a lot of research and published together. And also this European group you see here, that we were able to win a bid for the Erasmus Plus project in 2016 to 19, have been very important for me. So it's Professor Wilfred McSherry, it's Professor Tormod Kleivan, Professor Linda Ross, Associate Professor Josephine Attard, Professor René von Leuven, and myself. So together we have published extensively in this area. And in addition, we have found each other in a shared interest of research, but we also developed friendship and fellowship and trust, and that has taken us a long way. So in the EPICC project that I believe you have heard about, because Linda Ross and Wilfred McSherry have been very much key people in this project. Here we came together, 31 researchers and educators from 31 European countries. And our achievements are very important in the European part of nursing education. So the main achievement was the EPICC Spiritual Care Educational Standard with spiritual care competencies in undergraduate nursing programs, where we agreed on these are the 4 competencies that all should achieve during their bachelor studies. So in addition, we also developed a toolbox, and we have a matrix. So you see the website there, it should be rather easy to remember. So if you go there and check out, you can see more details. And you can also become a member at no cost. And then you will be a part of this interesting European and beyond network. Yeah, so then we're back to spirituality and spiritual care. And in the EPICC project, we were able to agree on a definition of spirituality and spiritual care. So this is what we ended up with. It's taken from the European Association of Palliative Care. So it says spirituality is the dynamic dimension of human life that relates to the way a person, can be individual or community, experience, express, and or seek meaning, purpose, and transcendence, and the way they connect to the moment, to self, to others, to nature, to the significant, and or the sacred. So you see the keywords are meaning, purpose, transcendence, and connection. And then it states that spirituality is multidimensional, and 3 areas are outlined. The existential challenges that you might recognize as existential questions related to meaning and suffering, guilt, hope, despair, love. Do somebody love me? How will my life be? So the second are value-based considerations and attitudes related to what's most important, and also to ethics and moral. And the third is religion considerations and foundations related to faith, beliefs, practices, the relation with God or the ultimate. So this means that in my tradition, spirituality is the overarching concept, and then the existential challenges, the values, and the religious part are dimensions of it. In a Norwegian context, spirituality often make people think about religion and Christianity because of our historic background. So often nurses would like to say spiritual/existential, just to make sure people understand it more openly. And so it might be where you live and come from also, that you would like to use other concepts to communicate with the public or within your own profession. So it's important to reflect then on what words and concepts would work well for you, where you work. And in the end, how do you understand and use spirituality? So we also have a definition of spiritual care. So spiritual care, that's care that recognize and respond to the human spirit when facing with life-changing events. So these life-changing events can be positive, as the midwives remind us of, for example, to be pregnant and have a new child, or it can be more challenging and difficult life events like trauma, ill health, loss, or sadness. And spiritual care include the needs for meaning, for self-worth, to express oneself, faith support, and perhaps for rites or prayer or sacrament, or simply a sensitive listener. So this, with a sensitive listener, that can be understood as spiritual care. I think many of our patients and those we are caring for, they recognize that as a very important aspect of care. So the last part of this definition is spiritual care begins with encouraging human contact in compassionate relationship and moves in whatever direction need requires. So spiritual care begins with the encouraging human contact in compassionate relationship and moves in whatever direction need requires. This is exciting, but for some also frightening, because it can be like an open door into a new landscape, and it can make personal and professional. It takes personal and professional courage to open up and follow the lead. And for many students, they say, I don't know. I might ask one question, but what do I do afterwards? So the need for role models and having professional, more experienced professionals to guide and to help you and to show is very important. So with these definitions in place, all could be well. However, students report from their placements and tell spiritual care is poorly defined. It's the least focused on professionally. It's what nurses know least about. It's little spoken about and rarely documented. And we see very few role models. And in a Norwegian context, both nursing students and even nurses report that it's more taboo to talk about spirituality than sex. I don't know how this is where you live, but it really is a huge challenge for us in education if this is the reality. So I'd like to talk to you, to share with you some of our research findings. So this is from a study, a grounded theory study we did with 42 undergraduate nursing students, focus group interviews, and we used, as you see, a grounded theory. So we found the main concern of the students was how to create a professional relationship with patients and maintain it when spiritual concerns were recognized. I think many students are concerned with how do I create this professional relationship, what does it mean? But for these students said that it was added an extra challenge when spiritual concerns were recognized. So how did they solve their main concern? So we call the core category opening up for learning. And when I teach, we have classes of more than 200 students. And I sometimes have to say to them, you need to open up for learning, because their whole body expression, this was before Corona, was telling me, I'm just here, but I don't open up for learning. I don't engage in this. I don't relate it to my experiences. So it starts with opening up for learning. And then they go through 3 phases. So that is preparing for connection, connecting with and supporting patients, that's in clinical practice, and reflecting on experiences. It's a process that goes like a spiral through their nursing education, and I would say beyond education, into the clinical practice when they work as a nurse. But you have to open up for learning. That's the key. So this shows how the students learn. So in the 3 phases, they first have to know themselves more deeply. So that is related to who am I? What's my growing up? What's my experience? What are my strengths and the challenges? What I'm afraid of? what is feeling strange to me because of my background and lack of experience, or because of my experience. But also preparing in class is very important. So I mean, if you are going to meet nursing home residents, with the majority have a dementia, how do you do that? That's different from working with palliative patients or outpatients. So you have to prepare in class and on your own with reading and studying related to the population you're going to care for. So the second, when you are connecting in clinical practice and supporting patients, it was very touching how students describe how they connected with patients in mutual vulnerability, and how they wanted to support the patients in a respectful way. And the third one is thinking through what you did, the reflecting that they sometimes have to do as mandatory assignment, or it can be just a way of thinking, reflecting, and sharing experiences with others. And then research shows that sharing, discussing with fellow students, with teachers, with the preceptors out in clinical practice is very important. So often we are kind of woken up by the emotions after a situation. It's like the awareness of what is happening in the situation. It can be a good feeling, you feel happy, this was really working out well, there was a deep sense of connection. Or it can be not as good, as this was not right, it was difficult, or it was challenging or disturbing. So the emotions that waken us can help us to know which situations we need reflection about. And I think students, and also when we are kind of authorized healthcare professions, the continued reflection is very important. So describing the situation, how did you think about it, how could you do it differently, and the last one also to reflect it related to theories and other research, to kind of build up your professional knowledge and professional reasoning is very important. So this is from another research we did. This is summary of the reflective notes of the students' mandatory assignment, where they had to write up their experiences of talking with patients about spiritual issues. It's interesting to see, because we just gave the students the assignment of doing an assessment, not following up. And I find that is very often helpful to open up, because you are not sent out there with kind of expectations to solve things. You're just sent out there to try to understand and to listen. So to sit on a chair and to listen can be very important. The students said that they met themselves. They felt it was quite challenging to have this conversation because they saw it as very personal, very private, and very sensitive. And it provided an opportunity for them to reflect on their own faith and worldview, and what would they say were their hopes and strength if they had to share with another person. And then the second category we developed we called beyond your comfort zone. So it was important to be willing to go beyond what they were comfortable with, to sit there and to listen, and to be having this uneasy sense within themselves, but still continue to do it. And that helped them to reflect on the role they had in the conversation, and they moved along these 20, 40, 50, 60 minutes conversation from resistance to openness. And then they also reported that they discovered the other. And they said it was so interesting that these kind of simple questions could open for such deep conversation. And some of them had chosen a person they knew from beforehand. And they said, you know, we have never talked about such things before. I got to know this person on a much deeper level. So out of this, our conclusion was that it's very important that such assignments are mandatory, because the students that need it most, they would have backed out if it wasn't mandatory. And in our material from 385 reflective notes, it was about 10 students who said that, oh, this was really great. I love to talk about these things. I have often talked about my friends and family about these issues. So that was the absolutely minor group who expressed they had experience in this area. So, I think there is a good reason, at least in a Norwegian context, to be careful and sensitive about what can I talk with the patient about when it comes to spirituality. So this is a summary of questionnaires we had to 157 hospitalized patients. And their open comments, they kind of grouped the patients in three main groups. And you see there is one group that say, don't talk to me about spirituality. And one group said, you might. And the last one said, do ask. And many of them said, oh, I would love if they were asking me. And you also see that the level of trust and the caring attitude is a key mover. If you move towards do ask, it's good, it's okay. Or if it's moved you towards maybe. Or even if you are uncaring or if it's not a trustful relation, it could be don't talk about it. But it seems like, at least in a Norwegian context, there is a group of patients say, I don't want to talk about this. And this is not your professional responsibility to relate to me in this area. So it takes some professional judgment and discernment to know how to do it. So that is why the art of asking questions are so important in nursing and in healthcare. So how can we ask? So this is a very, very brief summary of two studies we did, where we used 21 questions developed from literature by Professor Elizabeth Johnson-Taylor. She tried out this questionnaire in New Zealand, and we wanted to use it in a Norwegian context. So it's the same 21 questions, and we ask nurses, how comfortable are you in assessing a patient and using these questions? And then the same questions were given to patients and say, how comfortable are you in being assessed spiritually? So when we compared it, you see that there are some I just give you two questions that the patients and nurses agreed on. These are good questions. These are the ones we are most comfortable with asking and being asked. Who and what supports you when you are ill? And what do you rely on in times of illness? And you see these questions are quite open. So you can share as much as you want. But still it indicates that I have an interest in how are you. And the questions of the 21 they liked least were these two. How integrated are you in a spiritual community? And would you like to explore religious matters with someone? So at least in a Norwegian context again, these are seen as too narrow, too religious, is my interpretation. So go for the open ones. So use simple and important questions. So you might have heard about the 2QSAM. They are developed by Linda Ross and Wilfred McSherry. And they are very open. What is most important for you just now? And when you have listened to that, how can I help? An experienced postgraduate nursing student shared with me when I was teaching about using the 2QSAM, and she said, you know, I found that if you ask again after some time and some conversation, what is most important for you just now? And continue to listen, and perhaps even ask one more time, is there something else that is important for you? Then the patient will understand that you are really interested in me and what is my concern. So this is a challenge for all of us, and I think we should dare to ask such a questions. What is most important for you just now? So this is from another study we have done. This is from interviews with 22 nurses from all parts of healthcare, outside palliative care. And we wanted to do it outside palliative care because that's where the most research has been done. And I think being kind of in the palliative phase, or perhaps dying, the existential and spiritual aspects of your life becomes really more upfront, and also those working in palliative care are more open to these things than in general healthcare, it being in hospitals or home care, nursing homes. So you see in this model that we developed that there are two arrows going all the way. The first one is the willingness to overcome my own comfort zone. So it's the same as the students talk about. So I have to be able and willing to go beyond what I'm comfortable with. And the other one is building a trustful relation. So these two have to be there all the way. And then we found 3 phases. The first one is we call tuning in. And as some said, well, you have to kind of open up when you go to work that there might be something of spiritual nature that is coming up today. It be that you open up yourself, you look for signs that you can recognize as spiritual and or spiritual nature. And when you realize that, you can go further and start to uncover deep concerns. So in that, you have to manage your time and the patient's privacy and respect the patient, but also you have to dare to go deeper as a person. And the third phase is facilitating healing. So again, you have to follow the patient's pace. Attentive engaging, these are the activities that we kind of put together that could be from listening to giving a cup of tea, to pray for a patient, to facilitate concrete things. Yeah, could be very diverse what was needed. And then the nurse had to balance herself in the profession. The collaboration with family came out as important, and team working. So who are the best person to work with these patients or these families? So if you cannot talk about spiritual matters in your team, then you have a challenge with how to use your team at the best. And another aspect that came out very strong in our research were that the nurses were advocating priest care. So that, you know, we have this priest. It could be a hospital chaplain, or it could be in the municipalities where there is a priest in every municipality. So that person is a wise one, and they have more time So you don't need to talk about the faith thing, but would you be willing that we connected you with a priest? So this is the process we called that we're leading to healing. It was facilitating healing for the patients. But it took the willingness to overcome one's comfort zone and the ability to build a trusting relationship. So then I've been lucky to apply and receive at WEED at my university a SEP project, Spiritual Care Education and Practice Development, which is an excellent in research project, where we have been able to move on and to look more into practice development. Because one thing is what you teach in school, but the most important part is what's happening in clinical practice. So the aim of the project is to become an acknowledged international center of spiritual care education and to have a special focus on education in clinical placements. And we also have a collaboration with Global South at the University in North Haiti. We have 5 work packages. So one is a scoping review that we soon will publish. And then we have 2 PhD students, one that focus on mental health, and it's going to interview patients in mental health, specialized care, and the other one is working in nursing home. And the 4th work package is that we are developing the EPICC competencies that I mentioned earlier into a self-assessment guide. So we have been working with scholars from Norway, Wales, England, Netherlands, California and Ghana in developing and testing it. So that is soon ready to be published on the EPICC webpage. And then we will start our work next year with the university in Haiti. So this is the group that have been working on the 4th work package. See the names here. And nice picture from when we could gather before the pandemic hit us too strongly and everything closed down. So I just show you the, if you don't know it, the 4 competencies that was developed in the EPICC project. And the knowledge, skills and attitudes that comes along with it. So it's 28 items, and we have developed that into a questionnaire and, as I said, tested it. So here you see the numbers of students that were testing it. We aimed at 300 and at least 300, and we got 323 students, and we tested it in English, Norwegian and Dutch. And it's interesting for us also to have Ghana as a part of the testing of the tool. So we developed the procedures for translating it. So if that is of interest to you, if you're a non-English speaker as your first language, or working in a country where you use another language in education than English, you can find the translation procedures at the EPICC website. And to do the translation work is really making a difference of how you can connect and how you in that way can kind of start building a network to promote the use of the competencies and use that as a way of checking, where am I really? In which areas do I need to develop? It's an example of the first competence, how it looks like in the self-assessment tool. And you see we have framed it as I understand the concept, I can explain I reflect, I take care, I'm willing, I'm open, and then you tick off from 1 to 5 in a Likert scale. So in that way you can summarize if you want, or it's easy to see, am I on completely disagree or fully agree? So how is my competence kind of pattern in the different competencies? And since it's both knowledge, skills and attitudes, you can see, are my attitudes higher scored than my skills, for example, which seems to be the pattern for students where we have tested it. So you can get an idea of where you need to stretch your comfort zone by checking out this questionnaire. So I'm coming to an end for my keynote. So the theme was, I had to dare to go beyond my comfort zone, ways to promote lifelong learning of spiritual care. So I'd like to summarize to say that research seems to point to that it's important that the education is mandatory for all students, and that they have to read theory and research so that they have knowledge in the area of spirituality as they have in other aspects of their professional practice. It's important with the follow-up and clinical placements with role models. And students and healthcare professions need to continue to develop the art of asking questions. And you can start with what is important for you and take it from there. And undergraduate and postgraduate studies must lay the foundation, but leaders in healthcare must facilitate for continued education and relevance for the patient group where you are working. So I'd just like to finish off with an example that is from home care part of the municipality where I live. A nurse was accused that she had prayed with a patient, and it was questioned if that was the wish of the patient or if it was something that the nurse was pushing towards the patient. So in that process, the leader said, from now on, nobody are allowed to talk about God with patients. To me, that is very unprofessional. Could you imagine that if there was an infection after a urine catheter was entered into the body, that the nurse leader would say the same. From now on, we will never use a urine catheter because it causes infections. No, that's not what we do. We say we have to have education and we have to help each other to develop skills so we are doing it right. So that will be my message to you too, that it's the same in the area of spirituality and spiritual care. We need knowledge and we need to help each other to do it right so that the patients get the care they need and they want. Because we think we are delivering person-centered care and holistic care, aren't we? So then it's time for questions and comments.